important question. Okay, Zok Taylor Gemara. It's not hard anymore. More it's easing off. Okay. Does anybody remember where we finished last night? So we were learning if someone is not identifiable. So if someone doesn't identify himself, what's the word for it? Yeah, if someone doesn't identify as a male from the time he's born, he's not considered a ganza male. And if someone doesn't identify as a male when he's older, he doesn't even qualify as a human. But we're just talking about at birth. So Zok Tehela Gemara. We are 4 lines from the bottom on Kuf Chavav Mebes. Amar of Ami, Tumtum Shenikra V'Nimsazon. A Tumtum who cut open the skin that was covering him, and he found out that he was male. Einoi Noitel Pishnaim. He is not a Bechor to get Pishnaim. The Amar Krav V'Haya Habein, and we dash in the V'Haya means when the Bain became, in other words, when the Ben was born, he was identifiable as a Ben. If he behaved like a Mitzvah Moyer, we would not treat him as such, because the Parsha of Mitzvah Moyer doesn't apply to him. From the time he was in being, the time he was born, he had to be identified as a male. Amemar adds to it. The person who was not known as a male is not memayit chelik b'chor. We'll see in a second what that means. Shenemar v'yoldu leibonim ad ben b'shas leida. So the Rashbam explains this beautifully. Amemar amar af eina memayit chelik b'chor. Oisay tumtum shenikra v'nim sezar. This child. Imhu pashut ve'enei b'chor. What if he's not a b'chor? He's any one of the other later children born. He's not memayit the chelik b'chor. And we'll see in a second what that means. V'chol nichseyav tishaman. Let's say the father had 9 fields, 9 portions. We'll say 9 fields, and there's 3 sons. V'hen shloisha banim. B'chor u'pashut v'tumtum. There was the b'chor, there was the one other brother of pashut, and there was this tumtum. 3 brothers in total. So what do you do since you don't count them for a chelik b'chor? When you want to determine what the Pishnayim is, normally you just split up the estate into 1 more than the amount of sons, and that's the Pishnayim. But this fellow doesn't count for that. So you don't split it up into 4 chalokim, even though there's 3 sons. You only split it up into 3 chalokim, ki ilu ein kan, ki im bechor upashit, as if there was only 2 sons here. But tumtum commander lese. You look at the tumtum like he doesn't exist at all. So what's going to happen? Umagia lechelek habechor shishamonim. The chelek habechor will be 6 out of the 9 parts, right? Because it's 2 out of 3. Shin beis chalokim. Livisha bechor noito pishnayim bepashit, and you only count it as 1 brother who's a pashit, because the tumtum doesn't come into the chelek. Now, nimtza chelik b'chayra shaloishaman. So the chelik b'chayra will be 3 parts, because he gets pishnayim of the pashat, but he also gets chayzim v'cholkin hashishta. So the chelik b'chayra is 3 out of 9, right? So you split 9 into 3 chalakim. Each one was 3. So now the chelik b'chayra, the chelik pashat, and the other chelik pashat. So you take first the Bachar takes his 3 of Chelik Bachar off the table. Now the estate is left with 6 pieces. So Lagabi taking a Chelik HaPashut, this Tumtum was considered a child. So he'll get 2. So Nimtza Bachar Noitel Chamisha Manim, because he got the 3 of his Pishnayim, plus he got 1/3 of the remaining 6. Each so that's how you would split up the Yerusha. Avol, you have a mamayit, if the tumtum would be mamayit from the Chelik HaBechor, loy hayu HaBechor noito ela arba v'chotzi monim. he would only get 4.5 manim. Pishnayim keneged kolech. Because then you would have split up the 9 portions into 4. 9 into 4 is 2.25 per portion. The Bechor would get 2 of those portions, would be 4.5, and the remaining 4.5 would be split in between the other. We split in between the other 2 brothers. We need mamayit chelik b'chayra. So even though he's not mamayit chelik b'chayra, avol chelik poshet mia mamayit mikvah. So even though he doesn't count, this total doesn't count when we're calculating the chelik b'chayra is, but when we're calculating what the chelik poshet is, he's very much one of the Yorshim.
Why does he get anything if he's a Suffolk male or Suffolk female?
He's not. He's a Vadai male. We just didn't know this until a little bit later. By the time the Yerusha is available, we know he's a male. But when the child was born, we didn't know that he was a male. Remember, I said someone who doesn't identify as a male at birth, we can be Moichel, be considered a male later. But someone who doesn't identify as a male at all, I don't even know if he's a human. Okay, now for sure I'm going to get thrown out. You do. So what are we saying over there?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out this works out.
You see how pictures of the heart, you could see some more. Take this very seriously.
This works out only better for the before and worse for everybody else.
That's right.
Because they go from having 300.
You noticed that.
No tumtums in the family.
Okay. Gewaltig. My timer, v'yoldu loy bonim, v'haya ben ha-bechor, mishu ben b'shas leida, choylek ha-bechor kenegdoi chelik b'chor.
What happens if there's only before and the tumtum? Here
So,
we're dividing, we assume there's somebody else. What if there's just the before and the tumtum?
and that would be an interesting thing. That would be an
Does it
interesting
take
question.
everything? Before take everything? Does it take 3/4?
No, because that's not chelik ha-posh.
Takes 3/4?
I'm not sure how it would be.
It seems like it seems like you're asking who went for the easy case.
How many brothers do you have?
One. And you have to ask my mother.
Okay. Mumayit lechelik b'chayim nabcha. The hoki mash mikra. Keneged abonim mishas leida yita chelik b'chayim. When you calculate as chelik b'chayim, it's connected the children who are bonim at that time. And chelagot, he'll get a bigger piece. The tumtum will not be counted with them. So yita b'chayim el connected shnayim ahead. He'll only take connected 2 of them. The chashain merubin memayit chelik b'chayim. The more other brothers there are, the smaller it makes the chelik b'chayim. Zog to Gemara of Rab Shravya Omer, and I'm reading the Gemara not the way the Gemara has it written, but the way the Bach tells us to read it. So Rab Shravya Omer was a little bit later. Af ein imay timei aleiga. The Omakra, the pasuk says Isa kish sazria.
But did you skip the whole
I skipped Rab Shizbi and I went to Rab Shravya because the Bach puts Rab Shravya first. Okay, so yes, that's what I meant. I'm not following the Gemara's order. I'm following up Shravya's. The Amakra Isha Ki says and it says in that parsha V'tama Shivas Yomim Ki Meinidas Devaisai Titma. And then it says Ushloishim Yomim Teishe B'dmei Tahara. So for the first 7 days, the woman that you're led is tummy, and from 7 to 40, which is a total of 33 days, even if she sees dam, it's ignored. It's considered dam toyar. If an cave is born, we double up. So for 14 days, she's vadei tamei, and then for the next 66 days, for a sum total of 80 days, even if she sees dam, she's tall. So this child, Shrav Yomer af ein imay tamei aleda, the Yomer Isha ki says Ria v'yolda zachar v'tama shivas yomim ad sheyeh zachar mishas leida. Unless the child is Zachar Mishas Leida, it doesn't have the 7 days of Tumah and it doesn't have the 33 days of Tahir. But now is where Rashi says something, or the Rashbam says something fascinating. Af ein imay tamei leida. You see, the Rashbam also switches the order around. So Zok the Rashbam as follows: Shiva im nikra v'nimchaz nimtzazah. If the baby ends up being a male, the mother will not have yemei tumah of 7 days that would normally be applied to the mother of a male. But look at what the Rishbam adds. The gam loy shvu ayim im nimsa nekeva. She won't be tamei for 2 weeks and then Torah for another 66 days if the baby turns out being in the keva. Tichsiv v'yolda zachar u'v'tama shivas yamim v'achinam eksiv im nekeva seilei v'tama shivu ayim. So the whole parsha of Yoledes does not apply to a tumtum, not as a female nor as a male. Yoledes tmeyahi afapi she'ena royadam. So the Rishbam is filling us in that this Yemei Tumah means whether or not they saw Adam, she's going to be Tumah. Okay, and now let's look back to Rabbi Shizbi. Shizbi Omer Af Eino Nimoy Lishmoina. This child will not get its bris on the 8th day. If the 8th day falls out on Shabbos, Avada, this child needs a bris, but it's not Doicha Shabbos. Damakra Isha Kisas Ria B'Yolda Zochar. And such a child who is born as a Zochar, let's see the Rashbam on this. Okay, so that is the Gemara. Frag the Gemara Akash, Hamapelas tumtum vandroginus. What if a woman gives birth to a tumtum or an androgynous? Teishev. And we don't know, I guess we don't know if it's male or female. We couldn't tell because she was mapil, but you couldn't tell. It wasn't developed enough, something like that. Teishev lezochar ulinike. She has to be machmer. Maybe it was a zochar. So therefore, she only gets the 33 or the 40, total 40 days of Yemei Taira, ulinikeva, but she has to go to Chumrah, maybe to the Keva, and she's going to be tummy for sure for 2 weeks. So what's going to happen is 40 minus 14, because 2 weeks are 14. 40 minus 14 is equal to 24, right? So for the first 14 days, she'll be Bava. Tell me, 26, I'm sorry. And for the next 26 days, she will be for sure tar, even if she sees down. That is what the price says. The problem is, according to Rab Shravya, she doesn't have Yemei Taira or Yemei Tumah, neither of a Zochar nor of a Nekeva. If anything, she should be like a regular Nida. If she sees Dam, she's Tameh. If she doesn't, she's not Tameh. So Aktumar Tiyuvta de Rab Shravya. Tiyuvta. Shravya is Alkish Lomim because he said for sure that he doesn't have to sit any Yemei Tumah or any Yemei Taira. The Brisa says black and white you have. Frek the Gemara, Leimatav Tiyuvta de Rab Shizvi. Maybe it's a Opshog on Rab Shizvi as well, because this is telling me you don't look at the V'yolda Zochar. You ignore the V'yolda. It's the same V'yolda Zochar that talks about Mila. It talks about the Tumah. Zukvino, you don't have a raya that the Tana is for sure paskening that you don't look at the V'yolda and totally ignores the fact that it says V'yolda Zochar and holds even a Tumtum has all these halachas. And therefore, a Tumtum would also have a din of Mila. You don't say that. Why? Because maybe Tana Spukim Misafkali. Maybe the Tana is not sure. Does this child have to be born a male to have all of the halachas of Yemei Tumah and Yemei Taira? A and B is does the child have to be a male at birth to have a chiyuv of a bris on the 8th day, even though it's Shabbos? He didn't know. So therefore, ulachumra. Therefore, when it came to Tumah, Yemei Tumah and Taira, he says you got to be machaber both ways. But when it comes to a bris, it'll be a big kula if you say that you make a bris. So therefore, could be his makmas and don't make a bris because he's not sure. So therefore, you don't have a raya keneged or shizbi, but you do have a raya keneged of shab. Frank Gemara, if you're going to tell me that the Tana was only speaking lechumra, and that's why the Tana said teishav l'zachon l'keva, because maybe it doesn't have to be identified at birth. And therefore, since it's a sort of Zorch and a Keva, maybe you have to have those chumras. It's possible, you're telling me, that this Tana holds a suffix. So it's possible that this Tana says that maybe you don't sit, you may tumah tahira of a Zochar and a Keva l'chum. Maybe you also have to sit on the nida l'chumra. Meaning, if you go both l'chumra based on Duvi's assistance with the map, there would still be 26 days of available Yemei Tahira, right? But if it's not a lot at all, so it should also possibly be a nida, meaning it should not have any Yemei Tahira at all. And you see the Brashi doesn't say that. The Brashi just says, Teshev l'zachrum. So tomorrow kasha, okay, you have a kasha, but it's not an upslug, because you could say the Tana meant that as well. That's what the Rashbam says. Okay, so that takes us to the end of that sugya. Omar Rava Kavosei, the Rav Ami. I just want to point out that this whole sugya started off with the following halacha. Because the question is, what is this doing over here? So the Rashbam tells us this whole sugya, what it's doing over here is, let me see if I can find it. No, I'm sorry. This is not gay. We're still talking about the halacha of a tumtum that's not clear what it is at the time of its birth. So I'm a little bit premature about what I was going to say. But we'll go back there. Tanya Kavasei, Amar Rava Tanya Kavasei Rab Ami. We learned a right Rab Ami about this halacha that Ben has to be identifiable as a men at birth. Ben v'lo tumtum. So you see, it says Ben v'lo tumtum. That's the raya, and bechor v'lo sof. So for the Gemara, Bishlama Ben v'lo tumtum, I know what the brisa means. It's kiddur Rabami. It's Rabami's halacha that if the baby's a tumtum at birth, it doesn't have the halachas of a zocher for all these list of items that we just learned. Ella bechor v'lo sofik. What does that mean? Bechor v'lo sofik. What about a sofik? What halacha does the sofik have? Lafuke mai. What is the brisa? What message is the brisa trying to tell us? Zokt Gemara lafuke mididarish rov. It's telling us not to paskin like what we're about to quote from Rav. The Dorish Rava, Shnei Noshim, Sheyoldu Beis Chorim B'machva. Two women gave birth to two children and they got mixed up, and we don't know which one was the Bechor. So I guess these are two wives of the same man, and we don't know who the Bechor is. So the halacha is one of these two is definitely a Bechor. The other brothers are definitely not a Bechor. But if each one of these brothers try to come on their own and say, I get a double chedek, the other brothers will tell them, prove it, you're a Bechor. But if they give each other a power of attorney, then in any one of them, representing him or his brother, can demand the chedek of Bechor. So why is this shver? This is shver because if it says Bechor v'lo sofik, it means a sofik doesn't have any right at all. So how could you possibly delegate your right if it says Bechor v'lo sofik? The only child that is did of a Bechor is a Vade Bechor, not a Sofik Bechor. So a Harshah doesn't help because they're both Sofik Bechors, and Sofik Bechors don't have their own power to be able to get Pishnayim. So you see, this is so from Bechor v'lo sofik, the Bryce is telling us not like Rava. Only a popular Rava. How could you say this? How could you say that they could write a Harshah? Ravin said, I sent this shayla to all of my rabbim. V'loy amru davar. They didn't say anything, except Rankach amru. From Rav Yanai, they did quote Rav Yanai as saying, "Hukru ulebesoif nisarvu." If at birth it was identified who the bechor was, but later on there was confusion and they got mixed up, then coach from our shah zeloseh. Because then, when one was born, it was a bechor. It wasn't a sofik bechor. But loy hukru. But if it was never known and never identified who the bechor was, then it's taka bechor v'lo sofik and ain't kosher in harsha zeloseh. But Rava seemed to have said it across the board. Hadar uki Rava amoyer alei. Eventually, a Rava asked someone to announce v'dorash and he darshan shamarti lechem dvarim shamarti lechem tosein biyodi. What I said that they could always write a harsha in the case of a sofik is not true. From Kach Omer Mishum Rav Yanai, what Rav Yanai said is Hukru Ulubesoitness Arvu. That's when Koshrin Harsha zealous. But Lo Hukru ain't Koshrin Harsha zealous. So the Rashbam raises a problem.
Goes back to the question.
Which question?
It will be coming to Lafuke.
Look, it's coming to Lafuke that if it was that in the case where it's Loy Hukar That's a chiddush. The chiddush is this chiluk, that if it's loy hukar, then you cannot write a harsha. Doesn't, even though Rav agrees to it at the end, but it's an important halacha that the Brisa needs to tell us, not a pasha tezach. So now we have a little bit of a problem. Because I could only give you a power of attorney if I have something. I can't write you a power of attorney on what I don't have. But if you hold if you hold like Rav Papa, that you only have your chelik b'chayr b'shas chalukah, how could you write a harsha on something you don't have yet? That's the Rishbam's kasha. So let's look at the Rishbam and see how we deal with it. Kosh v'narsha the zelozeh. V'azi chad minay, one of the two comes, but tova chelik b'chayr b'na'achin and demands the chelik b'chayr. In b'chayr ani tnuli b'shvil atzmi. If I'm the b'chayr, then I'm asking for it for myself. V'im lav tnuli b'shvil achi. I'm representing my brother. Very nosan li chelka. So the Rishbam asks, it's not his chelik yet. Upaskinin lo'il, yesh loy lebechar, koidem chaluka, and therefore v'yochal limkar, litin chelik b'chiras l'chamish yirta, the moment the father dies. So, v'hak milsa also krolamute. To answer Mother's question, and this is what the chiddush of the pasuk is, b'chor v'lo the Yavalgav the Medina Islay, even though Ikra Den, the B'chor, wherever he is, has his chelik, there's a kasavu shlo yitnu le chelik b'chayr min asafik, if it was a suffix from birth. So the Rashbam is saying that this halacha that the Gemara is saying now only makes sense that I could give you over my chelik b'chayr to be able to collect it for me only if I already have it now. Tosfos has a different approach, because I could see from a Yitzchak that he's thinking as hey, why can't I just make him a shliach? Why does it have to be mine? So that's what Tosfos says. Mididarish Rava shnei noshim sheyoldu memech l'kois mashol zelzeh. V'im toimar harav papi mishmei de Rava amar. It was a papa actually. The ein lo lebechor kadem chaluka. Veich yovei lito bechayra mikayich chiduch. How could I take the bechayra mikayich my brother if it's not his yet? V'im read ein zeh ba el mikayich shlichus the hilchasya shav yishliach. You can make a shliach. So whatever he has in it, he could make a shliach to stand by the chalukah and be kanya at that point. Why the Rashbam didn't want to say it's working to a shlichus is maybe he holds that you can't make a shliach on something that's not there either. That could get into a whole series of Rosh Hashiva Shurim. If you ever want to become Rosh Hashiva, you already have starter material. Okay, so to Gemara weiter. The people of Akra da Agma sent Shmuel the following question. Yilamdeinu Rebbe, please teach us how to deal with the following shayla. What if it was known? Everybody knew this is the Bechar. Everybody, Avigdor's the Bechar. Avigdor's the Bechar. And then what happened was, then your father says, no, the other brother's the Bechar. Ma, what is the Allah? In other words, is a father Neman neged a chazak. We already had this shayla. So Machlek Shem Yehuda and the Rabbanan. So Zok Gemara Sholach Lahu Chaytzvin Aisha Zelozeh. You know what he told us to do? One of these two people are the Bechar. In order for them to be able to demand the chelik b'chayr from the rest of the brothers, they could write each other a harsha. This way, either one of them can collect on behalf of the other brother. Between the two of them, it's still going to be a little bit of a problem. Okay. Write the Gemara Manusha. Why would it be necessary to write his harsha? Ikar abundance spherely. If you look at the Rabbanan, that the father is not Neman, Keneged a Chazaka, Lishlach Lukar Rabbanan. So the son, who always had the Chazak to be the Bechar, he's the one who could demand his Chelik Bechar. And Ikar Yehuda Sfirla, who holds that the father is Neman to identify the Bechar, even Keneged someone who's already Hosik a Bechar, then Lishlach Lukar Yehuda. So let the one that the father designated be the one. So why would Shmuel Paskin in such an interesting fashion where they need a harsha? Zok Gemara, maybe Misafkele, Ikra Yehuda, Ikra Rabbanan. Maybe Shmuel is not sure, and therefore he is not sure if the father's Neman or not. So we don't know who the Bechar is. Therefore, they have to write a harsha. One of them would have to write a harsha to the other. Mahi, what is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan? The Tanya Yakir. It says Ki Bechar Ben Asno Yakir. The father has the right to identify who the Bechar is. Yakirenu la'acher. He could make it known that he is the Bechor over anybody else. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Rabbi Yehuda, Neman Adam Loimar Zeh B'ni Bechar. A person is Neman to say that this is my son and he is my Bechar. Ucheshem Sheneman Adam Loimar Zeh B'ni Bechar. The same way someone is Neman to say about his son, identified he's a Bechar. Once we know he's such a Nemanus, then Kach Neman Adam Loimer Zeh Ben Gerusha. I'm a Kohen and he is my son, but I married a Gerusha, and there's a Gerusha that's the mother of this son, so he's a Cholo, or Zeh Ben Chalutza, which would also make him a Chol Midrabban. The Chachamim Maimrim Ein Neman, he's not believed. So let's stop here for a moment. Why would it be Neman Loimer Zeh Ben Gerusha? Just because I'm given a right to say who's a Bechor, who said I have a right to passel the Zichus? So the Rashbam says, Kach Neman Loimer Zeh Ben Gerusha. After I divorced his mother, I took her back. And this is the child born from that marriage. Or he married a divorced woman. It's a svara. Once the Torah gives him the power of identifying a child, mali bechar, mali ledavarach. That's a little bit difficult because there's a huge difference between saying Mashal is not a Bechor approach. Kach Neman Loimar Zeh Ben Gerusha Tema. Lafisha Neman Levaker. Ye Neman Gam live soil. The Loimar Shu Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza. That's really a lot more power. V'yesh Loimar Kivon Sheneman Levaker B'chol Inyan. Since he is Neman to make it to a Bechor, so B'chol Inyan Hamina Koser. No matter what the impact of that testimony, where he will be believed, to state someone's a Bechor, it will still be believed. Could you imagine if he has 6 children and he goes to the second to the last child and says, "You're my Bechor"? Basically, it's saying that all others, your mother fathered with the milkman, and they're all mamzerim, right? Remember we had a mice not too long ago where a guy heard his wife tell his daughter, "Why do you have to be so promiscuous? Not everybody needs to know. Only one of the boys are my son with your father," right? So by him saying this is the Bechor, he's never to make all the older brothers into mamzerim. So you see, he has a koyach even to identify his son if he's kosher. So therefore, because it must be they must have been fathered by a different man. Rabbeinu Elio Mafar, it's a very interesting twist. The Yakir Nami Koyes Ben Asnua. We're talking about in the pasuk that Kisa Bechor Ben Asnua Yakir losses L'Pishnayim. Koloimar Ben Asnua Yakir is also Nemon to say that this is the son of a Snua. What does Snua mean? Snua Ben Yisuel. She's also to me. The Neman Loimar Shu Ben Snua, Dainu Snua Ben Yisuel, Kedim Afarisberg raised the Avamis, Koin Chai Belavin, Shenosa Koin Grusha. So that was his. But Akolpon Toshis gives you a very good understanding of why, by identifying somebody as a Bechor, that also gives you the power to pass on somebody. Zok Gemara Vayter. He's not believed. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak L'Rava Bishtam Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the father has an amonis. We have a pasuk that teaches us that halacha. I need to say yakir because the yakir is extra. El Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, that the father does not have an amonis to identify somebody as a Bechor if there's somebody else that is assumed to be a Bechor. So yakir lamli. What do you learn out of the pasuk yakir? So the more b'tzorach. Not when there's a chazaka. There was no chazaka. But it was unknown who the Bechor was. There he's Neman. Why is it relevant if we don't know who the Bechor is for him to tell us? The only reason why it would be the Geir is because he wants that fellow to get Pishnayim. The Metzvah Pishnayim. I don't need a special Nemanus of the Torah to give my son Pishnayim. You know why? I'm Neman to say he's a Bechor to receive Pishnayim. Bigo, I can give him Pishnayim right now, my lifetime. Lo Yehei Al Acher. Even if he's not a son. Ilu boy le mitzvah b'matana mi lo yoivle. So weiter, why does he need a special Nemanus? Yes, assets that he has right now, he can give his son, any son, whatever he wants on those assets. But what if he's going to yarshin something after he dies? And he wants his son, who's the Bechor, to get Pishnayim of that. For that he has no mikul, because he can't give them now something that's a loy bala oila. So therefore, it's relevant to identify your son who's a Bechor, even though there's no chazakah against it, it's relevant so that he will be able to be identified as a Bechor and take the Shnaim, even of things that the father doesn't have. Correct the Gemara, Uller of Meir, the Amar Adam Makna Davar Shloi B'Loilam, and the Rashbam speaks out that usually Reb Meir is about Pelukta of Reb Yehuda, so this is probably Reb Meir, and he holds that's not an issue. I could be Makna something to you now that's Loi B'Loilam, that I didn't even Yarshin yet. So I was a Yakir Lamali. Vita, what do I need Yakir for? I have a Migo, I can give it now. That's Gemara. The reason why he needs it is because if he's a Goises, at the time, he has Nechasim that come to him when he's a Goises, where at that point, he is not able to give any Matanas, so it's that. So that's why he wants to identify the Bechor now, to make sure that the son will get Nechasim, even that he only received when he was a Goises. Okay, Gavaltik. Let's see the Rashbam. The Chazal says not for lucky to Goises. The Dam of Mesechus Smachos HaGoises Harei Kachayil Chol Dvar. He's a live person. Ubar Yerushahu, and he can still yarshin. Ulahanin Nechasim Itzrich Yakir. It's for those Nechasim that we need the word Yakir to Yitel Behena Bechor Pishnaim, so the Bechor will get Pishnaim even in those assets. The Behana Lakamigo, for those assets there's not amigo. The Afidal Reb Meir the Omar Adam Makna Davar Shaloi B'Loilam. Even Reb Meir, who says you could be Makna Davar Shaloi B'Loilam, Hanamili Kagoy Nechasim Shenaf Leloi Bisha Yesh Bekoich Litam Lacher. That's only Nechasim that you receive at a time where you are able to give it as a matana to somebody else. Although Goyza is Einu Yachal L'Daver, he can't speak, Ve'ein Bekoich Litam, and he would not be able to give those Nechasim at all away. The Hilchach Le'motzi Laknuye Mekamid Asli Yadei. Those he would not be able to be marked before he has them. Even when they're in his hands, ein yochel laknoisam the choshekain mikaydlu. Now, I have to correct the mistake I usually. Everyone's giving me a dirty look. I just said that it's even the get to the chasm that'll be kind of later. He's not around later. So I was completely wrong about that because the next words of the response correct me. We're not talking about something that came la'achamisa. When we say something that comes later, means it'll come later, but in the lifetime of the deceased. But to answer that, you need to identify him as a Bechor to receive Pishnaim of something that he received Achamisa, it's not relevant. The Ein Bechor Doitel Barani. Because anything that comes to the person after he dies, that goes to his children. But his children don't get Pishnaim. So you saying?
Once he identifies him, and what he believes, why doesn't he continue even later on? You're saying that
It does. That's why we need his nemanos. In other words, the Mikoi would only give him the nemanos Lagabi what he could have done with the Mikoi. So whatever he could have given away himself, Lagabi that he's believed to say the child's a Bechor. You're telling me once I believe for that, I should now be believed fully that he's a Bechor. But since my nemanos only comes Mikoyach to Mikoi, so my nemanos only works to do whatever the Mikoi would have done. The Maskon is that Yaakov tells you that he has a real nemanos. So now you see it's negay. Even though there's no chazak against me, having a real nemanos is relevant for things that I would not have been able to give away without that. The Taisa says a posh svara. The chazman shnav look shugay says you didn't have to say that. Hachanami have a matzah l'shnoi ben the chazman l'avida da'asi. Even your mayor who holds a person as a makadav shlei b'laylam, that's if it's avida da'asi like dekal l'peroisov. We know the parish are going to grow in the decal. But Mehechatei I'm going to get a Yusha from somewhere while I'm alive. So therefore, you don't have to come on to Goises. There are things that even if Meir would agree would not work, even though he holds Adam Akdavar Shalai Balai. Okay, Zok to Gemara Vayter. Taner Abban. Hayu Mechsakim Bay Shu Bechar. They knew that Reuben was the Bechar. And then Amar Avu Al Achar Shu Bechar. And then the father said that somebody else is a Bechar. So the halacha is Neman. He's Neman. So this seems to be like Rabbi Yehuda, that the father is Neman to say Ben Abanim is a Bechor, even though there's a chazaka that somebody else is a Bechor. What about how you mechzaka by she'ena Bechor? We always assume one of these younger children was not a Bechor. The Amar of a Bechoru, and the father said this is a Bechor, they're Eino Neman. He's not believed, which means it's not like Rabbi Yehuda. So you're right. Reisha Rabbi Yehuda. The Reisha is Rabbi Yehuda talking, and that's why the father's Neman. to say someone's a Bechor, even though there's already somebody else who is assumed to be a Bechor. And the Sefer who holds the father is not be believed is going according to the Rabban. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. What if Amar Benihu, he identified a person, this is my son, and then a couple of minutes later changes his mind, the Chazar of Amar Abdihu. And then he says, no, he's my Eved. Rishbam says it's even if he said a Teichid Yibum. The law is Einoi Nema. The person won't be believed. Why? Because you would never refer to your son as an Eved. Okay? Einoi Nema. I'm sorry, you would never refer to an Eved as your son. So if you first called him your son, it's impossible that he's an Eved. But on the other way around, if you said Abdihu, the Chazar of Amar Benihu, if you first identify him as an Eved, and then you identify him as your son, then he's Neman. You know why? Because it is normal for someone sometimes to refer to his son as his Eved. You know why? The Mishamash Lika Abdo Kamar. It was a term of endearment. This is my servant, meaning he serves me so wonderfully, and then he calls him a son. That's not shver. However, the halach is, in those days, if you would go through the border, the customs would charge you a fee for every servant that you have, but they wouldn't charge you a fee for every child that you have. So if you said by the border that this was your son, and then later on you say to Eved, you're believed, because you only said it was your son to avoid paying tax. But if by the border you said it's an Eved, and you pay tax, and then you want to say it's your son, there for sure we don't believe you. Because if it was your son, really, you would have said so at the border. The Chazar of Amar Abdihu Neman. Amar Abdi Chazar of Amar Benihu Einay Neman. I just think you have arrived at the Gemara that by customs, when there's no proof, you could maybe say that. I'm not sure. Zak Gemara may say. What if there was a child or there was a person that was the mishamish this man, mamish like a son, and the Rashbam says not like a Eved. There are certain things that a son would do for his father, help him walk, help him dress, and then there's certain things that an Eved would do. The type of things that this person was doing was things that a child would do out of love for his father. Uvava Amar Benihu, and then he said, "This is my son." The Chazar of Amar Abdi, then he changed his mind and said, "This is an Eved." Ein an Eved is not believed. This fits in very nicely with what we learned so far, because you would never refer to your child. You would never refer to your child as an Eved. I'm sorry, you would never refer to your Eved as a child. That's right. Okay, but Hoya Misham Sheika Eved Uvav Amar Abdihu the Chazar Benihu Einonem. Now that's inconsistent with what we just said, because we said maybe he meant that he's my dear son, but he's Mishamish Mikeved. Amar Nachman Yitzchak, no. Hasam, the case here where he's not believed is the Ka'arele Abder Meitzemoi. What he said was, Abder Meitzer Me'emoi. This is an Eved. He's a good Eved. He's worth $100,000. That you're not going to say about your son. You might say, oh, he's my Eved because he treats me so nicely. But you're never going to say he's my Eved and he's worth $100,000 if I want to sell him in the marketplace. To talk to Gemara, my Meitzer Ma, Meitzer, I'm sorry, it's not so. Abda Meitzer Ma, my Meitzer Ma, Meitzer Abda Kuv. It means it's a Eved that's worth $100. That someone would never say it about a son. So therefore, if he said this person is an Eved, it's worth 100 zuz, he can no longer turn around and say, this is my son. Shalach le Rab Abba le Rab Yosef Barcham. So this is what I meant to say earlier. There's going to be a whole series of halachas that we're going to quote in the name of Rab Abba to Rab Yosef Barchama. We paskin like all of them. The reason why we quote a whole series of these halachas are because one of them is going to be relevant to paskin like Rab Yehuda. Rab Yehuda, that the father is Neman, even Neged Chazaka, to identify his son as a Bechor. But the rule is that all of these halachas we do paskin like, except for one, and at the end the Gemara is going to do a summary. So Shalach Rab Abba Rab Yosef Barcham. You have a servant in your house, and I say, that's mine. You stole that servant. And my friend says, I didn't steal the servant. What are you talking about? Well, Mativu Etzla. So what is my Eved doing in your house, working? So you answer, Atamachartel. What do you mean you sold it to me? The reason why I have it. People walking around, you never have a chazaka. You're not a muksa because he's in your rishus to have it. He walks around. Maybe he walked in for a cup of coffee. So there's no chazaka. So what is his time? Zokter is problem. This that we say moving objects like animals don't have a chazaka. Hanimila alter. That means like if you have the evidence in your rishus, I can't say, oh, it's a muksa. But what if this moving evet was working for somebody for 3 years already? That I can't say, oh, he happened to stop him for a coffee. That would be a very long coffee, right? So therefore, they're Yeshlan Chazak. So the case over here was when he went to confront his friend, what do you do with my Evid? It's in the case where the Evid was by this guy for 3 years already. And this guy's saying that he bought it. Now, Me'ikar Adin, the person who has the Chazaka on this Evid can tell the Teveh, take a hike. I don't know you nothing, get out of here. Or someone to call the cops for trespassing. But he was benevolent, and he said, you know what? If you're so sure that you didn't sell it to me, I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal. If you swear that you never sold it to me and that I stole it from you, I'll give it back. And Vinishba, and then this guy went and swore under that assumption. You told me I should swear, and then you'll trust my shvua, even though there's no halacha to be machayiv me a shvua that gives me a right to swear and take it back. You told me, you made a deal with me. If you swear, I'll give it back. Finish, but then you swear. At that point, I said, nah, I'm just joking. I never meant, there's no such shvua. You can't say that. Once you made a commitment that if he swears, you're going to give it back to him, you give it back to him. There's a whole discussion in Tosfos if you regards to Bava and Ishma. What if he didn't swear yet, but you made that commitment already? Can you back out at that point? There's a whole discussion. But for sure, if he swore already, you can't back out. What is the chiddush of that halach? Tanina, it's a mefursha mishnah. Amar loy neman alai ab. What happens if I'm taking you to the entire? Now, my father normally is not a kosher dayan to paskin on my entire. But I say, you know what? If you want to take my father's dayan, I'll accept his psa. Or neman alai avicha. Or if you want your father to be the dayan, I'll accept his psa. Or nemanam alai shlosha raya bukher. Or even 3 people who aren't learned. Whatever they say, I'm asking to follow what they say. It's basically like signing an arbitration agreement. So the halacha is Rav Meir Omer yochal achsaboy. Rav Meir holds it still be chayzer. The Chachamim Omer ain't yochal achsaboy. So isn't that what the Chachamim is saying? So what is your chiddush if it's the sheet of the Chachamim? Dr. Mahakamash Malon the be'eten loch machloikis. There is actually a shaila how to understand the machloikis Rav Meir and the Chachamim. Is it before it happened or only after it happened? So there's such a shaila if it's be'eten loch machloikis. In other words, there's 2 questions that could have been. It could have been I'm the teveya or when I'm the muksa. So even if I'm telling you, I'll give you. In other words, I'll if your father paskins to take it away from me, who's the muksa, and give it to you, who's the teveya, which is similar to our case. Even there's a machloikis halacha kedivra chacham, because you could also learn that machloikis there is only if I'm trying to get it out of you, and I say I trust them to say that I can't get it out of you, you get to keep it. Maybe only over there is there a machloikis. But if it's a question of me even committing to let you take it from me and not just hold on to it, right? Just I could be the teveya trying to take it away from you, and I could be the nifba you're trying to take it away from me. So there's a tzad to say that the machloikis Reb Meir and the Chachamim is only in a case where I'm being the teveya and you're the muksik, and I say if your father or these Rayabakar say you can keep it, I'll let you keep it. But that doesn't mean it would also work in a case where you're being teveya me, and I'm saying if your father says you can take it away from me, I'd also do that. That we don't know. So there was a shita who hold that this machloikis is only in a case where I'm going to let it remain by the muksik. If these people paskin, there's a machloikis. But to take away, everybody holds you can't. And therefore, no one would paskin like the Shita of Rabami. But who's the one who's making the deal? Who's the one who's saying, I'm willing to accept your psak? So here he's saying a huge chiddush. I'm willing to accept your psak, even though you can take it away from the muhsik. Exactly. If you were the muhsik, and I'm telling you, if they pass like you, I'll let you keep it. That's a smaller chiddush. It's a bigger chiddush to say that if they pass like you, I'll take it away from me and give to you. So the chiddush is that the machlokes is in that case, and that we pass like the chachamim, in fact, that it works. So
Or would be prepared.
so what?
I agree with this whole scenario. If you have it already,
It's the status quo.
that is cool.
Right, as far as it's more mistaber that my commitment should work if it's only letting you keep it. But to make my commitment work, if it's letting it come away from a Muslim, that's a bigger chiddush. And that is exactly what the chiddush of Reb Abba or Reb Yosy ben Chama is that the machloikas is even in the case where I'm agreeing to give something away based on this arbitration agreement, and we pass like the chum that in fact it works. Okay, we will stop here. So tomorrow we're going to learn a whole bunch of different halachas that were presented by Reb Abba and Reb Yosy ben Chama. Okay.